In the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, fully grown sharks have been found drifting lifeless, their bodies untouched except for one precise removal. No struggle, no visible wounds, only a single organ taken. The predator responsible is rarely seen, and what it leaves behind raises a far more unsettling question. What truly rules the ocean when the hunter itself remains almost invisible? In the vast, shifting waters of the Atlantic Ocean, one predator stands closest to any other to what we might call dominance: the orca. At first glance, the reasons seem obvious. It is large, it is fast, it hunts in groups. But these traits alone do not explain what sets it apart. Because the orca does not simply overpower its prey, it understands it. There are documented cases where large sharks, including apex species, are found lifeless, their bodies largely intact except for the removal of a single organ, the liver. Rich in nutrients, dense in energy, and targeted with a level of precision that suggests more than instinct, there is no prolonged struggle, no widespread damage, only efficiency. This is not random feeding behavior, it is selective, and that selectivity reveals something deeper. The orca does not hunt everything, it hunts what matters most. Its methods are equally refined. Rather than engaging in direct confrontation, orcas often use a technique that appears deceptively simple. By flipping a shark upside down, they trigger a natural response known as tonic immobility. The shark enters a temporary state of paralysis, alive but unable to move. In that moment, resistance disappears and the outcome is decided. This is not a contest of strength, it is control over the biological system of another creature, a level of interaction that goes beyond physical force. And it does not happen in isolation. Orcas hunt in coordinated groups, each individual contributing to the outcome. Positions are maintained, timing is precise, movements are synchronized. There is no chaos, only structure. This coordination allows them to take down prey larger than themselves, to manipulate situations that would be impossible for a solitary predator. But perhaps the most important detail is this: not all orcas behave the same way. Different groups develop different hunting strategies, even when living in similar environments. Some specialize in fish, others in marine mammals. Some focus on specific techniques passed down through generations. These patterns are not genetically fixed, they are learned, which means they can change, adapt, evolve over time. And this introduces a form of flexibility that few other predators possess. Because the ocean is not static, conditions shift, prey moves, opportunities change, and a predator that can adjust its behavior holds a distinct advantage. This is where the idea of dominance becomes more complex. The orca is not just powerful, it is adaptable, capable of refining its methods based on experience, of improving efficiency, of responding to new challenges. And in a system as vast and variable as the Atlantic, this ability matters. Because strength alone has limits, speed alone has limits, but the ability to learn extends those limits. Which is why, at the top of the ocean, the orca appears to occupy a unique position. Not invulnerable, not absolute, but highly effective. A predator that does not rely on chance, a predator that reduces uncertainty. And yet, even here there remains a question. If the orca represents the most visible form of control in the ocean, does that make it the true ruler? Or is it simply the most obvious one? Because dominance in an environment so complex may not always belong to the creature with the greatest power. It may belong to something less visible, something less understood, something that does not need to be seen to have influence. And that is where the story begins to change. In the vast open waters of the Atlantic Ocean, power is often imagined as something visible: size, speed, force. But not all threats follow that pattern. Some do not chase, they do not fight, they do not even appear to act, and yet they are capable of ending life far more efficiently than many apex predators. Among them is the Portuguese man-of-war. At a distance, it does not resemble a predator at all. A translucent float drifting on the surface, carried by wind and current, with long trailing tentacles extending beneath. It does not swim with purpose. It does not pursue. It simply exists within the movement of the ocean. But beneath that passive appearance lies a mechanism designed for precision. Its tentacles contain thousands of microscopic structures, each capable of delivering venom upon contact. There is no warning, no visible preparation. The moment contact is made, the response is immediate. The organism does not need to overpower its prey. It does not need to hold it. It only needs proximity. And in the open ocean, proximity happens. Fish, small organisms, even larger creatures may drift too close, unaware of what they are encountering. There is no sound, no movement to signal danger. Only a surface that appears harmless until it is not. This introduces a different kind of threat, one that is not based on pursuit, but on inevitability. Because while a predator like the orca must locate, approach, and act, the Portuguese man-of-war simply waits. And waiting in a system defined by constant motion can be enough. But it is not alone. Across the ocean, there are other organisms that operate in similar ways. Jellyfish, drifting silently through the water column, rely on the same principle. They do not need speed. They do not need strategy. They rely on contact. And contact in the ocean cannot always be avoided. This shifts the idea of dominance. Because if a creature can affect others without engaging in conflict, without expending energy, without risk, then what defines its position in the system? It does not sit at the top of a food chain in the traditional sense. It does not control territory, but it influences behavior. Creatures avoid areas where such threats are present. Movement patterns change. Routes shift. Entire regions may be temporarily unusable, not because of a visible predator, but because of something that cannot be easily seen. This is control without presence, influence without intention. And it raises a deeper question. What is more effective in the Atlantic? A predator that must act, or a threat that exists continuously without effort? The Portuguese man-of-war does not decide when to hunt. It does not choose its targets. It is not aware in the way higher predators are. And yet, it remains effective. Because the ocean itself does the work. Currents carry it. Winds move it. Water brings prey within reach. It is not separate from the system. It is integrated into it. And this integration removes the need for complexity. No coordination, no learning, no adaptation in the moment. Only structure functioning exactly as it was formed to function, which creates a paradox. Some of the most efficient threats in the ocean are also the simplest. They do not evolve behavior quickly. They do not adjust strategies, but they do not need to, because their method does not depend on changing conditions. It depends on contact, and contact is always possible. This does not make them rulers of the ocean, but it does challenge the idea of what dominance means, because influence does not come from power. Sometimes it comes from presence. From existing in a way that cannot be easily avoided, from being part of the system rather than acting within it, which leads to a deeper realization that in the Atlantic, not every threat announces itself, not every danger can be seen. And not every force that shapes the ocean moves with intention. Some simply drift, silent, unseen. And when contact is made, the outcome is decided without struggle. Far below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the reach of sunlight, there is a region where visibility disappears completely. No horizon, no reference point, no light. And within that darkness, something moves. The giant squid. For centuries, it existed only as fragments of evidence, remains found washed ashore, marks left on the bodies of deep-diving whales, indications of something large, something powerful, living far below where humans could observe. Not a myth, but not fully understood. Even now, encounters with the giant squid are rare, brief, incomplete. Most of what is known comes from indirect observation, from traces rather than sustained study, which means that much of its existence remains inferred. Its body is built for a world without light, large eyes, among the largest in the animal kingdom, capable of detecting the faintest changes in brightness. In an environment where light is nearly absent, this sensitivity becomes critical, because here, seeing something, even for a moment, can mean survival. Its tentacles extend outward with reach rather than speed, lined with powerful suction structures. They are designed not for long pursuit, but for sudden capture. Movement is measured, controlled, conserving energy in a place where opportunities are rare. There is no constant motion, no continuous hunting, only stillness interrupted by brief, decisive action. And yet, the giant squid is not alone in these depths. There are others, predators that descend from above. The most notable among them is the sperm whale. These whales dive deep into the ocean, entering the same dark environment where the squid exists. Encounters between the two are not directly observed in full, but evidence remains. Circular scars on the bodies of whales, patterns consistent with the suction structures of squid tentacles, signs of interaction, of resistance, of conflict in complete darkness. What happens during these encounters is largely unknown. There are no continuous recordings, no clear sequences, only the aftermath, which reinforces a central reality, that the deep ocean is not fully accessible, not fully mapped, not fully understood. It is estimated that a vast portion of the ocean floor remains unexplored, regions where no human has directly observed what exists there, areas where conditions make long-term study extremely difficult. Pressure increases with depth, temperature drops, light disappears, and with each of these changes, the ability to observe decreases, which leads to an unavoidable question. If large, complex organisms like the giant squid can exist in these conditions, what else might be there? This is where speculation begins, not without basis, but without confirmation. There are theories that other large species may exist beyond current observation, creatures adapted to extreme depth, rarely, if ever, approaching the surface, organisms that leave no trace accessible to us, not because they are hidden intentionally, but because the environment itself prevents discovery. This does not mean that unknown giants are certain, but it does mean that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and in a system as vast as the Atlantic, this uncertainty remains. The giant squid becomes a symbol of that boundary, a known species that still feels unknown, a presence confirmed but not fully revealed. It exists at the edge of human understanding, where observation fades and inference begins. And this creates a different kind of awareness, not fear of what is seen, but awareness of what is not. Because in the deep ocean, visibility is limited not just physically, but conceptually. We see fragments, moments, clues, but rarely the full picture, which means that the true scale of life below may extend beyond what we currently recognize. And if that is the case, then the idea of a single ruler of the ocean becomes even more uncertain. Because how can dominance be defined in a place that is not fully known? How can control be measured in a system that cannot be fully observed? The giant squid does not answer these questions. It complicates them by existing in a space where knowledge is incomplete, where observation is limited, and where the unknown remains vast, silent, and for now, largely untouched. Vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, it is tempting to search for a single ruler, a dominant predator, a defining species, something that sits at the top, controlling everything below. But the deeper we look, the more that idea begins to dissolve, because the ocean does not operate like a hierarchy. It operates like a system. And within that system, the most powerful forces are not always visible. They do not hunt, they do not move with intent, but they shape everything. beneath the surface, vast currents move continuously, carrying water across entire ocean basins. These currents are not random. They are driven by differences in temperature, salinity, and the rotation of the Earth. Warm water flows in one direction. Cold water sinks and moves in another. Together, they create a global circulation pattern that connects distant regions, redistributing heat and nutrients across the ocean. This movement defines where life can exist, where food becomes available, where conditions allow survival or prevent it. A predator may dominate a region, but the current determines whether that region continues to support life at all. Temperature plays an equally critical role. Even small changes in water temperature can shift entire ecosystems. Some species require narrow ranges to function. Move outside those limits and survival becomes difficult. This means that the distribution of life is not controlled by predators. It is controlled by conditions. Invisible boundaries that determine where organisms can exist long before any interaction takes place. And beneath all of this, there is something even smaller, something that rarely draws attention: microscopic organisms known as phytoplankton. They drift near the surface using light to produce energy. Individually, they are almost insignificant, invisible to the human eye. But collectively, they form the foundation of the ocean's food system. They are consumed by small organisms, which are consumed by larger ones, creating a chain that extends upward through every level of the ecosystem. Remove them, and the entire structure collapses. Predators lose prey, food chains break, energy disappears, which leads to a realization that is easy to overlook. The largest animals in the ocean depend on the smallest, not occasionally, but constantly. This reverses the idea of dominance, because if control is defined by influence, then the organisms at the base of the system hold more power than those at the top, not through force, but through necessity. They do not hunt, they do not compete, and yet everything depends on them. This extends to the physical structure of the ocean itself. Salinity, pressure, depth, light availability, each factor contributes to a set of conditions that define what is possible. These are not variables that organisms can change. They are limits that organisms must accept. And within those limits, life organizes itself, adapts, adjusts, but never escapes the system. Which means that even the most capable predator, even the most efficient hunter, exists within boundaries it cannot control. The orca may dominate its immediate environment, the giant squid may occupy the depths, but both are dependent on currents that bring nutrients, on temperatures that allow survival, on microscopic life that sustains everything beneath them. This changes the question entirely, because if no single species controls the system, then what does? The answer is not a creature, it is the interaction of forces, a network between physics, chemistry, and biology, a network where no single element operates alone, and where control is not held, but distributed. This is the true structure of the ocean, not a kingdom with a ruler, but a system without one, where influence flows in multiple directions, where the smallest components can affect the largest outcomes, and where survival is determined not by dominance, but by alignment with conditions that cannot be changed, which leads to the final understanding that the Atlantic is not ruled by what lives within it, it is shaped by what surrounds it, and everything inside, from the largest predator to the smallest organism, exists only because the system allows it. In the vast and restless waters of the Atlantic Ocean, the idea of a single ruler begins to fade. The orca dominates through intelligence and coordination. The Portuguese man of war kills without movement or intent. The giant squid remains hidden, existing beyond clear observation. Each appears powerful in its own way, but none of them control the ocean, because control in a place like this does not belong to a single creature. It belongs to the system, to the currents that never stop moving, to the temperature that defines where life can exist, to the microscopic organisms that sustain everything above them. These forces do not compete, they do not decide, and yet they shape every outcome, which means the true ruler of the ocean is not something you can see, not something you can hunt, not something you can defeat. It is the balance itself. A structure where every living thing, no matter how powerful, exists within limits it cannot change. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all, because in the end, the ocean is not ruled by strength or intelligence or size. It is ruled by conditions, and everything within it survives only for as long as those conditions allow.